Good evening, good people of the snow. This is Ben Vandenbos with the Sawtooth Avalanche Center with your weekend update for April 2nd, 2021. As a friendly reminder, these weekend updates are not meant to replace the forecast. They're meant as a supplement for the forecast, something to give you a little bit of an idea of what the weather and the snowpack are doing going into the weekend, help you make your plans for the weekend. Before we launch into the coming days, let's talk a little bit about what happened this past week. We had a pretty wild week of weather, returned to winter for a couple of days there, when a very strong cold front blasted through the area overnight on Sunday into Monday. Temperatures dropped into the single digits above and below zero up high in the mountains. We got a little bit of skiff of snow, and we had about a 12 to 18 hour wind event that brought in a pretty widespread dust layer, unfortunately, before that little skiff of snow fell, and then did quite a bit of work on the upper bit of the snowpack as well. On this image you can see here on the right, this is a photo taken up near Banner Summit on Tuesday. You can see some pretty obvious signs of both drifted and scoured snow. Those real rough textures you're seeing kind of on top of that ridge line has scouring textures. And then those smooth, pillowy sections are big drifts and wind slabs that formed during that time period. We had increase in danger for a couple days as we were worried about these kind of isolated wind slabs that formed up high, and danger slowly decreased through the week, leading to low danger across all of our area yesterday on Thursday. Heading into the weekend, we're going to see some pretty warm temperatures and some pretty weak freezes, unfortunately. Photo on the right, you can see some serious water coming out of the snowpack. You can also see some ice. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem like we're going to be spending a lot of time in the temperature range where we're going to be making ice like that. Highs are supposed to be between 10 and 20 degrees Fahrenheit above average, and overnight temperatures are going to be right around freezing. So if we have clear open skies, we'll at least get the surface of the snow to freeze like we did last night, even though temperatures were hovering around freezing. However, if we have some more clouds that have built into the area, like the ones that built in this evening, we'll have some pretty marginal freezes, and the snow surface really just won't have a chance to set up. And that's going to bring us to our two main problems for the coming couple of days, and those are going to be wet snow problems. The most likely and most predictable of these problems are wet loose avalanches. These slides start at a point, fan as they go downhill, and entrain more debris, pick up a bit of speed as they go. The photo on the right here, Chris took this earlier today. This is in the southern Sawtooth near McDonald Peak, east aspect, a little over 9,000 feet. And what you can see is a pretty sizable debris pile down on the bottom right side of that image. Appears to have started at a point where some snow melted, started to move downhill, and as it did, fanned out and trained additional debris. These slides typically happen on kind of a diurnal cycle, where they're happening during the heat of the day when the sun's on a slope, or at least warming some portion of the slope. And then, at least as long as the snow surface is freezing overnight, these become less likely or unlikely in the evening hours. However, if we're not seeing overnight freezes, these sorts of slides are possible all of the time, particularly triggering them when you're in kind of deep, mushy snowpacks. The second type of wet snow problem that we're worried about are wet slabs. Wet slabs are just a difficult problem to deal with, both as forecasters and as backcountry travelers. In this image here, this is snapped. I took this photo 2 years ago in early April, just a little ways north and west of Ketchum. But this is a pretty sizable, destructive wet slide that occurred during a warm-up, not dissimilar from what we've got going on right now. The way wet slides happen is you have a relatively intact upper portion of the snowpack. You still have a snowpack that has some strength to it. There's a slab of snow, as the name implies, but there is water that's working its way through that snowpack, often finding these kind of preferential flow channels. Water is being piped down lower in the snowpack. It finds these crusts or these weak layers, and it pools on those layers. And the presence of that water weakens the bond at that interface. And because of that, you can see these wet slab avalanches happening. As I think it's relatively clear from that description, these are they're somewhat unusual phenomenon, and as I stated, they're pretty difficult to predict. We know the type of conditions that lead up to these sorts of avalanches, and we're headed for those type of conditions now. Whether or not we're going to be seeing a lot of these or not seeing any of them at all is really tough to say. When you have these periods with weak or non-existent overnight freezes, you have these pre-existing weak layers like the one that we talked about all season long near the base of the snowpack, and also some crust and facet layers in the middle of the snowpack. Slides like this are something that comes onto our mind. As far as management strategies for these problems, wet loose avalanches are much easier to manage. You're getting early starts when the snowpack's frozen, getting out of the mountains and avoiding steep mushy slope later in the day. And by doing that, you're also finding the best skiing and avoiding the problem. Wet slabs are a little less predictable because that water continues to percolate through the snowpack. Even if the surface is locking up, you can have water still moving through the snowpack. So the timing of those can be a little bit more offset. But the long story short of dealing with both of them is when you're trying to avoid wet snow problems, the best thing you can do is just avoid wet snow in general. We're going to have a pretty warm weekend, some pretty warm temperatures. We'll be seeing a lot of wet snow around. And so if you're finding deep piles of mushy snow or even crust with some mushy snow underneath, know that these wet snow problems are going to be on the table. Coming out of the weekend, we're going to get another storm, maybe some low elevation rain, a little bit more snow, send us back to a little bit more of a winter or at least spring mindset instead of this kind of the hot weather we're going to see the next couple of days. But until then, these wet snow problems are going to be at the front of our mind, and they're going to be what we're worrying about and managing to stay safe in the backcountry. So hope we find some good skiing and riding conditions this weekend and find some safe slopes to play on. And we'll continue to forecast until the 11th of April. It'll be our final date for this year. So thanks for paying attention. Thanks for listening, and let us know what you're seeing out there if you head out into the backcountry.